refer to the experience during their high school years regarding their journey as being part of the LGBTQ community. And I feel that it is very important and very vital to listen to these voices that are often unheard or silenced or marginalized, and our society needs to improve, our society needs change, and in order to create that change, we need to listen to those who are being affected by all the negative stereotypes or harmful comments that are directed towards the LGBTQ plus community. In addition, I wanted to say that I am recording this after I have already performed the interviews, and I realized that throughout doing some research and also throughout doing the interviews and throughout doing surveys, I have realized that my questions for the interview questions and the survey questions are not the best. So I do apologize for that, and I want to emphasize that these questions go beyond whatever is asked. So some of these questions are very broad, very general. I came to realize that I wasn't really applying the intersectionality aspect to it. There's more to an individual than one identity, and I just want to clarify that. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little and that you are open to the different perspectives, different opinions that may be presented within the video.
I am Antonio Gutierrez. I'm from Glendale High School in Glendale, California. I'm a first-year neuroscience, neurobiology major. And let's see, my preferred pronoun is he, him, his.
My name is Joanna Elizabeth Apodaca Hernandez. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I also respond to Reina. I'm originally from Cordova, California, which is in the Central Valley, 3 hours north of here. I went to Monachi High School. I'm a second year at a third year standing. My majors are geography and environmental studies and Chicanic studies, and my minor is geospatial information systems and technologies.
So my preferred pronouns are he, him. I went to school at Animal Venice High School, which is in West California, not too far from here. I grew up in Inglewood, California. I'm a third year sociology and Chicano studies double major with a minor education.
Male.
Okay.
I identify as male. Bisexual.
I was assigned female at birth. I identify as a woman. I identify as lesbian, but I also have a very strong feeling, conception of sexuality, and even beyond that, gender as very fluid, varying. I don't identify as non-binary because obviously gender is a performance. The way that I form my gender is feminine, but also I like to dress casually. I wouldn't describe it as masculine.
My assigned sex at birth was female. A trans man. Straight.
How comfortable did you feel being open about your gender identity and or sexuality in high school?
Well, during high school, I was actually going through questioning. I noticed that sexuality was still a very new concept, and people were not as open about it at all. So I did not share much about it.
So in high school, I was actually in the closet for a very long time, and that was as with many people I'm sure, just an internal battle with myself of understanding that my sexuality and my gender does not have to be confirmed or supported by our heteronormative society. And I guess that I wasn't there yet in high school. So I was very much in the closet. It wasn't until my senior year of high school when a group of friends who were in my class, in my senior class, they actually started a gay straight alliance, and I joined, and that was my first time being out in high school. Of course, like some of my very close friends knew. I could probably count them on my fingers. Yeah, I definitely wasn't secure with my sexuality at that point.
About my gender identity, I was not comfortable at all just because I did not come out in high school. In high school, I had lived my last year as a female, so I was not really scared in terms of expressing my sexual identity at that time. And then in college, that's when I came to terms with my gender identity, so obviously that changed. But I was okay in being able to hold hands with my significant other who was female. So it was a pretty okay thing in terms of feeling safe.
I feel it's been very, I want to say normalized here. Like, lots of people here identify as LGBTQ+, and it's a very welcoming environment. I feel like any prejudice that people have, like, I haven't really sensed any real prejudice here.
I'm actually very comfortable. I'm out, I'm proud. I'm not my sexuality. So of course I don't, go around, although I wouldn't, hate anyone or judge anyone who does it. I'd be like, yeah, with pride flags and stuff, but that doesn't mean that I'm not proud to be a queer woman, because I definitely am.
I feel very open just because, actually, it depends on what class I'm in as well, and just like what the vibe is in terms of like the students and the professor and what we're learning. So if I find that my identity can be relevant to like what we're learning, or I feel that I can contribute a little bit more about my experience in terms of what we're learning in class, then I'll be very open to it as long as I feel comfortable, which majority of the time I do.
Not completely discriminated or ostracized, but definitely a little more distant from everyone else. I would definitely, I feel like I would have experienced a little bit of more bullying.
Like I'm queer, it's not like I'm a woman, like period. These sentences are not individual and exclusive of each other. It's I'm a queer woman, colored, and at that experience of feeling ostracized from my sexuality, because I am very careful where I am. You have to be very street smart. You have to kind of know which space you can inhabit without incurring any type of violence, because I think that's the most important thing. Just people taking care of themselves, and because we know that these systems of oppression exist, so like we need to be smart about them, and we learn about them, and we need to apply them as a practice. There's definitely been occasions where I haven't felt safe, but that hasn't yet, and hopefully never will, translated into me being in a situation of danger.
I was not discriminated at all, I think, in high school. It was just like people joked about it, and I have a hard shell, so I didn't take it very seriously. And I knew that they didn't mean it like in a bad way. But yeah, I've never really been discriminated at all in terms of that.
I think that would definitely help. I feel like a lot of been in locker rooms.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I know that the movement toward creating gender-neutral bathrooms has been so long and difficult. Like even on this campus itself, we have very few and far between, meaning that they're very far from each other. And I know that folks who need to use those restrooms, obviously that poses an inconvenience to them. But yes, I believe that's a very important plan to take on, because obviously high school is one of these, it's a time of our lives that are really our formative years, and it's a place where we need to feel safe, learn, and we need to be safe in those learning environments, and that includes everything that goes down in the locker room, like that I have no better way of saying it other than saying we don't want to allow violence, physical violence. It's a violence of trying to consider to your own perspectives, your own conceptions of gender. And the fact of the matter is that that power belongs to them. And we need to fight for those folks who haven't had the shot to really feel safe, to feel completely in their spaces. And, you know, of course, like, being in this very heteronormative society, yeah, it's just, we have to stand up as allies, you know.
I do believe that they are necessary in terms of people who need to feel safe just in the bathrooms. Like, I know that I was fortunate enough to like not experience some things that others may have. So, like, I know that keeping in mind that others may have to come in contact with people who are not, like, open and not mean. Having those bathrooms and extra locker rooms just for feeling safe, because kids should feel safe, that's cool.
That definitely would help because I feel like my high school was a little more conservative.
Once again, long, honestly. It's unfair to and realize the resource certain things are where you are back home. And that's not only down to educational resources. It also has to do with how inclusive your school is and what kind of educators are at your school. And what type of people, of course, students are at your school, because that also plays a big role in your own educational experience. That's a very important, because, you know, it's not a matter of people identifying as something, it's who they are. So we need to respect that. We need to embrace that. We need to make sure that these folks who, you know, anyone, even myself, we need to make sure that everyone feels validated. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
I think it would make a small difference, but preferred name definitely. Preferred pronoun, I'm not quite sure.
That's a very important one. And like the reason why I have like trouble like responding to these, like it's kind of taking me some time, it's just because like I feel like these are very common sense things just for myself. So like that's why when you have to explain things that are, you know, that should be happening, it's kind of difficult to explain that because, I mean, you yourself don't believe that they shouldn't be happening. So many things. It comes down to a person's feeling of self-worth, you know, mental health, everything. And the thing is that we're very complex beings, and every facet of our being comes together and, you know, creates us. So if any part of us is missing or feels unvalidated, obviously there's a problem there. And we can't allow institutions to be part of that problem, which is why we need to, like, make all these changes. And I know it's out there who want to make these changes, and I know it's going to take time, but the thing is, like, yeah, they need to happen, and sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Definitely, because self-expression is very important in high school or in adolescence in general.
Should it force like an individual to use their self-expression because that's what they're close.
It would be taken seriously. I didn't see as much, but mostly because the bullying that took place was mostly like gossip and like online and cyberbullying. it didn't really take place at school.
So it was more like a type of, like a way of learning called restorative justice, I believe. So like that circles back to like the importance of like counselors, and that kind of just makes me think about how there's cops on so many campuses, school campuses, that don't even have a counselor. So I think for that question, like you were talking about like punishment. So like definitely like I would argue for like a restorative justice framework, because these are going to be human beings. You know, for the offenders, I mean, these are people who are going to go out into our world, and if we do want to see the changes that we so desperately need, like we need to use that sort of framework, that restorative justice framework, to make it a learning experience, not necessarily a punitive experience. Because the only thing you'll remember from that is how you wish you hadn't been caught, rather than like you know, actually being a good fucking person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't really. I feel like when students, especially like in this can go down like to elementary school even. When students are punished, they don't remember like the lesson. You know, like that's the purpose of punishment. They remember the fact that they were caught, or the fact that they did something that they shouldn't have. But they don't really. It's not really a learning experience. Really logical to kind of think about the fact that students would do something, for example, violent to another student who, you know, who is trans, for example. It's difficult to say, oh, they shouldn't be punished, because, you know, let's just bring in a counselor and like talk about it. I think that it has to be kind of like both things. You have to have that conversation, like between even and you know, that's when it gets messy, because you're like, well, do we want to put the students who you know, who felt the violence, do we want to put that student in a situation where things will get worse for them, you know? So yeah, that's a really complex question that I think really just shows you how important it is to have educators who think about these different things. Because you can't just have people who are like, oh, okay, well, they did something to this student, you have to punish them, and then, you know, you let them go. You have to have someone who's like checking on the student's mental health, and you have to have someone like looking at like any like behavioral patterns. Like you have to have all these like this comprehensive type of action plan. Yeah, because it doesn't all come down to one single act, I believe. Yeah. So I guess that was really long, I'm sorry, but what I'm trying to say is like, I think that type of situation, first of all, needs to be a learning experience, but also a just experience for the person who receives the violence. Yeah.
Yes, I do believe that. I'm not really sure like what type of punishments would be the ones that schools should aim to do, but I do believe that it shouldn't just be like a slide pass. It should be like, it should like emphasize that the student and the teacher, like the faculty cares about like the well-being of the student who has been harassed or bullied. In terms of punishments, like I think like just like schools doing things that could prevent those sort of things from happening. Like I strongly believe that kids at my school were a little bit more better, I guess, in terms of that, just because we have like an ethnic studies course, so like our teacher was very, very enthusiastic and very vocal about these sort of issues in the LGBT community, and would express her concern about that, and it just kind of felt like students respected that in a way.
Were you asked to share your preferred pronouns during high school?
No, I was never asked to state my gender pronouns.
No.
Were you asked to share your preferred pronouns at UCLA?
Yes, I have been asked.
At UCLA, yes. Either they have only asked for it in my discussion in my LGBT studies class, but some people just do say it when they're introducing themselves in terms of the whole icebreaker week. And then it's also like influenced by whether or not the TA or the professor says preferred pronouns are this and this, and then it just kind of like goes around and saying that like.
But nevertheless, there were still some people who joined it. There was one, it was not very well known. Would really have made a difference in not only mine, but other people who identify as LGBTQ+. There were more organizations or more staff members who took it upon themselves to be more vocal about
If I could go back to the Central Valley and become some sort of like superintendent or something, that would make so many changes. And it's crazy because it doesn't even come down to being queer. You know how we were talking about like all these issues, they're very intersectional. And I feel like, just how I was mentioning before, like the whole thing with there being cops on certain campuses that don't even have a counselor, like that's an issue that needs to be combated because, you know, we need that sort of, that expertise about the mental health side to it, because that's something that's really lacking. And that's something that queer students, trans queer students can actually benefit from. They can go in and see a counselor like, hey, like I'm feeling this way today, or this thing happened to me, and you know, because they need to feel validated. I think one thing I keep mentioning is the fact that students are human beings that are going to go out into the real world. So I think that educators and schools have are charged with the work of really allowing people to fulfill their best potential, to become the type of people that we want to see running the world. And for that reason, definitely counselors, mental health resources, queer organizations on campus that are inclusive, that allow students to come in and talk or not talk or just hang out. That can be done. But I think that's where it has to start.
Okay.
UCLA's mental health resources can be better. They can do better. At least. Where I'm from, there was a lot of silence around the matter of mental health and what it means to feel depressed, to feel anxious, to struggle with different mental illnesses, to the things that I have to continue working on. And part of that is just a lot of the experience that I had as a queer woman. Yeah, because honestly, like, just the way that we're educated in high school, when it comes to biology, when it comes to physical education, the very core of a lot of these like classes are transphobic, homophobic. Sex ed in high school is not provided for like queer students. It's also an issue that needs to be remedied. But the list really does go on, and it's really sad because like I can't believe like I made it out of there, and like now that I'm out here, like so much more needs to be done. Yeah.
Like I just mentioned the course where we learned about like think, and just the fact that like administration just took into the consideration of like the well-being of their students. I think like making sure that the teachers and the faculty are aware of like the issues that may arise in these kids, even though like it may not be obvious like what these kids are going through. Like you never know when someone might be feeling a certain way about their identity, and just making sure that the teachers and like faculty are like emphasizing in a way like that if they were to come out they would feel safe too, because I know that I was able to come out with, of course, my friends, but I knew that my teachers and what type of person they were, so that just made it easier because I knew that they would have my back. I can't think of anything on top of my head, just because, like I mentioned, I haven't really like experienced something like that. However, I think the implementation of them being allowed the preferred name on brewing cards, and not just like on the brewing card, but on like the rosters that TAs will use and like professors will use to like do attendance, in which case like they have the preferred name, so they don't have to like do this whole thing like awkward thing where like they don't want to say that their dead name is them, because like it, in a way it would out them, or they just like legit just feel really uncomfortable. I know that feeling of just like someone saying the wrong name, and like it just, I know it backfires on me because I'd rather be marked as absent than like out than say like, oh, did you mean this? So I think that like implementation and knowing that UCLA created this preferred name to help that like ease that anxiety for me and like for others was like a very good idea. I've had surgery in terms of my what we call the top surgery, which is just removal of the breast tissue. That's the only surgery I've had.
How hopeful do you feel about hate crime stopping and our society becoming more welcoming of the LGBTQ plus community?
I think for the former, the hate crime, I don't think they'll stop, but that's just because there's always going to be some person out there who's just completely intolerant of any signs of homosexuality or anything like that, and more accepting. I think our society does have room to improve. Our society does have the capability to improve, and people seem to identify as LGBTQ+. It becomes a normality. It becomes more of a social thing, more of a social or personal thing than a political issue.
Frightening statistics about that I don't know off the top of my head about how well, basically it has to do with the violence against trans women, the way that many trans women won't live past their 40s, and I'm sorry. So I feel like, as an optimist, and I'm not just like branding like UCLA or anything, because I know that's their thing, but I really am an optimist, because like I believe that social change is possible, and I believe that these systems of power can be dismantled, but the cold truth is, the statistics that I don't know, but the fact is that there's so much violence against queer trans folks in the world. I don't, just like with so many other things, I don't know if like I'll see an end to them in my lifetime, but we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep like carrying those voices, uplifting those voices, and fighting for those who can't speak anymore. Yeah.
I think my high school personally has done a good job in making sure that their students feel safe. However, I know that my school is really small and having less than like 600 students, and not a lot of people do come out at my school, but whenever someone did, it was always sexual identity. I guess it's more accepting in a way that gender identity is. So I think my school is pretty much okay, and the kids like in understanding like the importance of just being respectful towards someone's sexual identity. In terms of gender identity, like I said, I was not out as a trans man during high school, but I know that there's a student there now who identifies as a trans man, and I know that they are making sure that that student has their own bathroom and is just comfortable and has their own like pronouns, and just making sure that they feel safe. And I know that the 2 years before I graduated, there was another student who also was a trans man. So I know that my school has had history with that. I know that my school also had a trans woman come out, who I also believe had it the hardest, in my opinion, trans woman of color. So when she came out, the school was very, very dependent in her, and just made sure that she felt safe. So I think that's pretty good, and that was recently she graduated. So I think my school is doing good with that.
Hi everyone, so thank you so much for watching and for granting me this opportunity to share this with everybody, or anybody who is watching this. I really hope that this little research that I have been conducting throughout the quarter can hopefully expand into something greater. I really hope that in the future, whenever I have more resources and access to more things, I will be able to, go more in depth with my research and make a bigger research project. But for now, this is all we have, and I hope that all of you keep advocating for the LGBTQ+ community, and that you open your hearts, mind, eyes, everything to every single human being, because at the end of the day, we all feel pain the same way, and we all have feelings. We all matter to this world, and we can certainly all make a positive change in this world. And I have faith, and I believe that everything will become better, and the more we are actively involved and the more we are educated, we will be able to bring that positive transformational change that is deeply needed in our society and all over the world. Thank you so much for watching. I would like to thank all my participants, those who participated in the surveys through the Google Forms, as well as those who are here in this video for the interviews, and a huge thank you to Dr. Biegel, who really motivated me and helped me conduct this research. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching.